This probably isn't going to go on for very long since we did every game of every world championship. Not really. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a de facto world championship, not a de jure world championship, because my Latin isn't very good. Right, Arjun? Yeah, so Arjun agrees. Now, what I mean is, the winner of this match was declared the world champion later, but they didn't know that at the time, or maybe they did. And this was the match between Karpov and Korchnoi in 1974. Now, of course, they played world championship matches in 78 and 81. I have to tell you that. But this was this was the finals to see who would play Bobby Fischer. Don't go jumping at home with the right answer. And, well, Fischer wasn't going to play because he was busy. He actually had a good reason for not playing. He had just gotten a new house, and he had to move in. And you know where his new house was? It was in Crazy Town, okay? And so he was busy moving into Crazy Town. And Fischer made 100 demands, and then when they were all met, he made 100 more. So it was clear, not only was he not going to play the match because of the crazy demands, but it was also clear because he didn't play chess anymore. Most people who are Fischer defenders, because we need some of those people out, you know, they like to say, oh, Fischer was very reasonable, okay? Well, Fischer won the match in 1972, and then he didn't play any rated games in 72, 73, or 74. And he said he was going to be a really active champion. So he was active, I guess, in his own mind. Anyway, so since it was clear Fischer wasn't going to play, whoever won this match between Karpov and Korchnoi would be the world champion. Now, one of the games for this match is very famous. I'm sure you all know it. We could just skip over it. But I'll show you anyway, because Ken West was quite insistent. And then I'll show you a game that I didn't know about, which was in a Petrov defense, which was also quite exciting. Now, what's interesting about this is, this was game 2 of the match, the famous Dragon game. So now you all know what I'm talking about. And game 6 was a Petrov. So I guess Korchnoi couldn't fix the Dragon. So later, they made a movie about this match, which would have helped Korchnoi at the time, called How to Train Your Dragon. But they didn't have it out then, so terrible. Okay, so Karpov was white and played e4. Over the years, Karpov decided that e4 wasn't working very well against Garry Kasparov, so he started playing d4 more. But in the 70s, Karpov mainly played e4. And they played a dragon, and when you think of a dragon Sicilian, you normally don't think Anatoly Karpov, right? In fact, you guys are probably thinking, what's the dragon Sicilian, okay? But, well, people like to say white wins by force, black wins by force, because people like saying stuff like that. These are the same people who hang a queen every move, okay? And then they give you their opening expertise. Right, Arjun? Yeah, Arjun agrees. Okay, now, Karpov often would play classically against the dragon. He would castle kingside. He'd play bishop e2 and bishop e3, or bishop e2 and bishop g5, and then just play sort of boring, because he's Karpov. But in this game, Karpov made it clear that he's from the streets, okay? He probably was working with Dominique Meyer, even though Dominique wasn't born yet. So, hey, Dominique. Okay, so bishop e3, f3, and queen d2, the so-called Yugoslav attack. And this is the way people try to refute the dragon nowadays, although Kasparov played the dragon in a world championship match more than once, and Carlsen's played the dragon. So, you know, with people like Joe playing the dragon back there, obviously it's sound. Okay, so castles, bishop c4. Now the other move that's very common nowadays is to long castle, and after long castle, black had decided to play d5. Now d5 is not recommended. Unless you're playing me, then I recommend it, okay? Okay, so bishop d7 and h4. You can castle first, but usually they transpose. Rook c8. The bishop on c4 isn't the safest, so bishop b3. And probably the latest theory is to play the quote-unquote Soltis variation, closed quote, where black plays a very early h5, okay? And Korchnoi played knight e5 and knight c4. And One reason this isn't very popular now is because of this game, where Korchnoi got destroyed. So people were like, I'm only getting destroyed, I want to play better. So most people don't let white play h5, they try to play h5 themselves and block the king side up. And that's a completely different variation. And occasionally, I'll do some secret illegal preparation, and I'll prepare to have black in a dragon / accelerated dragon, and I'll have some novelty ready. But otherwise, I'm not playing this consistently. The American player who in the 80s and 90s played the dragon all the time was, don't all say it at once. Have a seat at home, you don't know. You! So you didn't see the movie How to Train Your Dragon. You probably saw it too, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Come on, somebody knows. Chris Ward, that's an American.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't hear that.
Which American in the 80s and 90s played the dragon every game with black? What do you guys do all day? You go to work? All right, the correct answer is Sergei Kudrin, okay, and he still plays it today.
Very American name.
And that's right. Well, actually, you know, people think that all the Russians like were super GMs that came over here, but actually Kudrin was like 1600 when he came here, so he actually got good here. Now Kudrin, as you well know, in the 83 or 84 U.S. Championship, I think 84, unless it's 85, he played in the U.S. Championship and with black got 0 out of 8. So maybe the dragon isn't as good as we thought. Okay, he played the dragon and the Benoni, the 2 safest openings you can play. All right. Now, after takes, white plays h5. If black plays h5, then white doesn't play h5, unless white sacrifices all his pawns first. Okay, and Korchnoi is like, yum, 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 yum. And then g4, and the knight goes back. Obviously, white has tremendous compensation for a pawn by having the open h file. Now again, if you analyze games from the 1970s with the eyes that we have now in computers and opening theory, maybe the moves aren't the best, although Karpov's moves are the best. And just to show you how strong they were, everybody in the world is 2,700 now. In fact, let me see. There's 3 people in this audience who are 2,700 FIDE. That's how easy it is to be 2,700 nowadays. And Karpov was 2,700 in 1974. That was very rare. In fact, there were times when there were no 2,700 players. Now, if you're not 2,700, you know, you can't get invited to any tournament. You can't even get invited to the U.S. Cadet, right, Arjun? Okay, that may have not been right. Okay, and Karpov played knight de2, which is not a move that would appeal to the people in this audience or the people at home. Okay, and knight de2 is a defensive move, making sure black never gets counterplay. One of the main ideas for black and the dragon is to sacrifice the exchange here on c3 and try to open up white's king. Obviously, if that knight's defended by another knight, that's not going to do anything. Okay, and also, this knight can sometimes come over to the king's side and help out with an attack. But mainly, knight e2 is for defensive purposes. Now, occasionally, white can also play e5. And now that there's no knight on d4, we have some pressure on the d file. And often white plays e5, and after it takes, g5 would win a piece, because the knight on f6 is defending the bishop. Okay, Korchnoi played queen a5. Karpov played bishop h6. That's the kind of move you guys like. And there's a lot of analysis. Some of it, black sacrifices his rook on f8 with bishop h8. And in one variation, he lets white play bishop takes, okay, he played bishop takes h6. And generally, I'm in favor, when I have black, of having my opponent's queen move away from c3 and c2 so I can get some counterattack. And occasionally you get checkmated. That's life, right? Sometimes you get checkmated. Right, Ken West?
Oh, yeah.
No, I said sometimes. So that's, okay. So Korchnoi played rook f8. And it just looks like a typical dragon game. Both sides are checkmating each other. And if you play inaccurately, you could lose quite quickly. Okay, now again, Karpov was the master of defense even when he was checkmating you. Very impressive. Okay, and he played the move rook to d3, which is a famous move now, because Most people, when their queen and rook are on the H file, they're not thinking defense. Okay. Now in 1974, they also weren't thinking Arby's. See, was Arby's around in 74?
Yep.
What, you agree? Man, was it just as bad then?
Yep.
Wow. Now, as a vegetarian, that's the only roast beef I can eat. There's no meat in it. Yeah, so I can actually eat Arby's. Okay, so rook to d3. Man, it's hard to sacrifice on c3 when white keeps defending it. How am I supposed to sacrifice on c3? That's not fair. Okay, so Karpov not only checkmated you, he made sure you didn't checkmate him. Okay, rook c5. The idea is, I don't want white playing e5. I don't want white playing g5. I protect everything. No attack for Karpov. And Karpov resigned because he had no attack. Arjun, you agree?
Instead of rook d3,
Yeah.
do I play g5 and knight f4?
Yeah. So you have no interest about your own king, just your opponent's. So yeah. Okay, so let's play like Arjun and see what happens. Probably the computer will break. So, okay, g5, and I assume knight h5 was the idea, right? And then you wanted to play knight f4, and then I'm gonna take your knight, and then you're gonna mate me. Okay. Now remember, black played queen a5, rook c4, rook c8. Why do you think he did that? Yeah. So should we do that? Yeah. You don't mind, do you? Okay. Good. Okay. Rook h2, that's the safest. I mean, I don't want to be mean and take your knight, but I think I might be mean and take your knight. I might be. I don't know if I will be, though. I think I could be mean some other ways, too. I think I could take it. Let's see. Do I get mated or I'm safe? Where's Laurence Olivier? What? Yeah.
Yeah, black's better than me.
Well, better's, yeah, being nice. Okay, those of you on YouTube with your engines can tell me why white's winning here. Okay, so instead of undefending c3, which he painstakingly defended with knight e2, right? Okay, he played rook d3. Probably it's gone. Oh, it is there. No rook d3. That's gone. The move can't be made. Also, there's a variation they give with knight f4 with your idea. This isn't me. This is the variation that the annotators put. Rook takes c3, queen takes c3, rook h2, stopping mate. Hey, this is our variation by transposition. Okay, so they agree with us. Okay, so what happened? Queen c3 is gone now? Oh, rook d3, there we go. Okay, so rook d3, safe. Rook c5, g5 anyway. That's not very nice. Okay, so black played rook c5 to prevent g5, and white played g5. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't speak English. Ken West. Disheartening. Thank you. He didn't say it, but that's very disheartening when you stop a move and your opponent plays it when your opponent's rated 2,700. If it was like Ken West who played g5, I'd be like, he didn't see rook g5. But if Karpov plays g5, I'm like, uh-oh. I just stopped that move and he played it anyway. Okay. Korchnoi took. He's like, I just stopped g5. What are you doing? Okay, now things are defending other things and things are happening. Rook d5. Now that's interference, right? Okay, and if knight takes d5, white has mate in 2 with queen h7, queen h8. So he didn't play knight takes rook. See how that works, Arjun? So what did he do? See, his queen's attacked, his rook's attacked. Rook takes d5. Yeah. Knight takes d5. So again, knight takes d5 isn't good because queen mates on h8. On the other hand, what's white threatening? If you trade knights on f6 and black takes with a pawn, his king has an escape. Although this seems to win a lot of material. Okay, so Korchnoi played rook e8, and now this isn't mate, because after takes, queen h7, the king runs out. Although, I don't think I like black there. All right, so he played knight f4. He's got 2 knights, 1 for each of you. Bishop c6, e5. Karpov, the brilliant tactician you all thought he was. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, why is Karpov so good? This isn't fair. Okay, so the idea is we're blocking the queen from coming over here. So they probably give the variation, but no, they don't. Okay. So the variation I see in my head, which is probably wrong, but if you're watching at home, just ignore this part. Okay, if he takes, it looks like I can take and play knight h5. I don't see anything wrong with that. Now we're threatening mate, and knight here's mate. And if you take, this looks like white's better, right? Okay, and then obviously mate. And if you don't like that, you could do this mate. Okay, so e5 is a real good interference. A lot of moves in this game are interference. So as you can see, white has a lot of attack on black's king, and black has no attack on white's king. Usually in a dragon, if one side's attacking, the other side's defending, and there's no attack for the other side, that's not good. Okay, so Korchnoi played bishop takes knight. This doesn't work as we just saw. Obviously, knight takes knight, keeps falling for the same two-move mate I keep telling you, queen h7, queen h8. Okay, so he played bishop takes knight, takes, and even Ken West is like, ooh, I see it. Okay, queen g7 mate, probably that should be stopped. Takes, check, king here, and now queen h8 check, and Korchnoi resigned. The variation is king e7, and now if you play rook e1 check, queen takes rook is a good answer. That'd be a good 1 minute game. Rook e1, queen takes e1 mate. Yeah. Okay, so you play knight takes bishop first, and now if you play queen takes knight, then rook e1 check just wins, because you're winning the rook on e8. And if the king moves, everything wins, depending on where the king moves. Okay. And so Korchnoi resigned. So after that game, people decided that opening the h file was good for white. And then they usually started playing h5. Now that game is quite well known, and I don't think you could improve on Karpov's play. The next game I didn't know, and you probably still can't improve on his play. Now I gave a lecture, I don't know if it was here or if it was in Charlotte, but it was on this opening, and there was a game, Ivanchuk Anand, where Anand won in like 20 moves with black in a Petrov. And it was this variation. And black played very aggressively with knight c6 and f5. Okay, and Anand with black got a massive attack against Ivanchuk, sacrificed all his pieces, and won very quickly. Okay, but this ain't Ivanchuk, this is Karpov in 1974. Now this was game 6 of the match, and it's clear that Korchnoi and his seconds hadn't fixed the dragon yet, so they played the Petrov. This is actually very funny to me. One of the best players over the last 25 years, Boris Gelfand, he's known for playing 2 openings with black against e4, the Najdorf Sicilian, very sharp, and the Petrov. And also he started playing the Sveshnikov Sicilian. So it's funny to play what's considered the most exciting openings in the Sicilian, and then play what's considered the most boring in the Petrov. But actually, the reason is Gelfand does a lot of preparation, so in those openings, he knows many variations past move 20. And so with the Petrov, he was drawing easily against players of his own rating, and when he was paired to players slightly lower than him, maybe 25, 2600, he would play the Najdorf and Sveshnikov and beat them. So Korchnoi, who's playing the Dragon Sicilian and playing a very sharp game and getting out-tacticked by Karpov, now plays the Petrov, but plays a very sharp way. And black's creating a lot of weaknesses, but black's being very aggressive. The knight on e4 is good, the bishop on g4 is good, although these pawns are weak, maybe the knight's going to get into e6, maybe this one will get into e6, or to e5, and black could get into trouble. Okay, so queen b3, and if I'm not mistaken, I could be, this is still the Ivanchuk Anand game that black won in 20 moves. Okay, and Korchnoi sacrificed his b pawn and said, I dare you to take that pawn. Karpov called over the arbiter and said, he's talking. Okay, and the arbiter said, no talking. All right, so, well, if you play queen b3 and you're attacking the b pawn and the guy doesn't defend it, then you should take it. Karpov played knight d2 because bishop f3 would have been annoying. And after king h8, he took on b7. And I don't think this is what Ivanchuk did. I think Ivanchuk retreated his queen to c2, which I didn't get. Well, he lost in 20 moves. So maybe back to the drawing board for Ivanchuk. Okay, and this is a problem when you start labeling things, okay? You call Ken West a grandmaster, and then you look at his rating and you get confused, okay? So when you label people, sometimes the labels don't fit. Usually it does. Usually Grandmaster Ken West makes a lot of sense. Now, the Petrov, people are like, well, the Petrov, that's the most boring opening ever. Well, sometimes it is, and sometimes it's like this, where it's not boring at all, where people are sacrificing material, and then both sides sacrifice material, and both kings are exposed. So chess can be boring if you want it to, really scary, or you can make it really exciting. Okay, it's up to you. Okay, excuse me, bless me. Okay, so rook f6, defending the knight on c6, preparing for a, as Jen Shahadi would call a rover, moving the rook up and over. Other players would call it a rook lift, and attacking white's king. Karpov didn't like the oncoming attack, so he resigned. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Oh no, that's not what he did. Okay, Karpov played queen back to b3, not liking his queen on b7 very much. Of course, it was black's move. Black could play rook b8, and after queen a6, there would be a nice discovery with the rook on f6. So Karpov's like, nah, no tricks for you. Okay, rook g6. Now, there's a saying we have in poker called all in. Okay, and that's what black is doing. Black sacrifices a pawn. Black has a bad pawn structure, but he's all in. He's going to attack the white king, and if it works, he wins. If it doesn't work, then he has a lot of issues. And probably at this point in the match, Korchnoi was behind, so you got to win some games, otherwise you're always behind. Okay, and this is the thing about chess that Fischer didn't like, one of the many things, was if you're playing a match with a limited number of games, let's say 8 or 10 or 12, if you're ahead 1 game or 2 games, you just draw the rest and you win the match. So you may have to take some extra risks. On the other hand, if you're forced to win 6 or 10 games, the match could go on forever, and you don't have to play like a lunatic hoping to win a game and catch up. And of course, matches are a fixed number of games for a lot of reasons. One is some venues can't hold a tournament for 5 months. So if it's first to win 10 games, and after 5 months it's 6 games to 5, people start saying, well, come on. Okay, so usually if it's 10, 12, 14 games, you know when the match is going to end at least. Okay, so rook g6, black's going on the attack. Black's playing very aggressively, even though it's a Petrov. Bishop back to e2, defense. And now, with the bishop on e2, this knight can safely move, probably to f1. If the knight moves otherwise, bishop f3 is quite annoying. So he defends the knight some more. Bishop h4. This piece configuration of the knight on e4 and bishop on h4 is exactly how Anand beat Ivanchuk. Notice the f2 pawn is attacked. Rook f1. And it looks like black has a tremendous attack for a pawn. Problem is, not only is black down a pawn, but his structure here isn't as good because his pawns aren't together like Karpov has sort of a nice pawn structure. And so in the long run, white's going to win. Black has to checkmate white or win some material. If nothing happens over the next 10 moves, white has an extra pawn and a good pawn structure, which may not be enough for some, but that was Karpov's bread and butter. Win a pawn, consolidate, win the endgame. So Korchnoi has to prove that he has an attack, and that's not easy to do when you don't have a forced win. You have to sort of keep building. So he played bishop f3 and played a very forcing line, which didn't work. Knight f3, bishop f2. And Karpov took, of course. And now white is up a tremendous amount of material, 2 bishops for a rook. Okay, I had a dream last night. I had 2 bishops for a rook, but I knew it wasn't possible, so I woke up. I'm like, no, this is a dream. I've never had 2 bishops for a rook. Okay, and in fact, even though black took the pawn on f2, white was already up a pawn. And this is actually a problem a lot of my beginning students have. When they sacrifice 300 pieces, they're like, oh, I can win a pawn. And I'm like, that's not, you can't decide to win material when you've sacrificed a lot of material. You have to checkmate your opponent. So even though he got a rook and a pawn for his 2 pieces, since he was already down a pawn, black has a totally losing material disparity here of 2 pieces for a rook. But he was hoping that white's king would be exposed and he could take advantage of that later. Okay, queen d6. Now he's coming to get him. Uh-oh, that's pretty scary. You scared, Arjun? Well, I'm scared. Queen g3, I'd be scared of that. I don't want the guy to play queen g3. That's annoying. And one of the reasons the top players are the top players is not only do they play forced wins when they have them, but they see their opponent's threats and ideas and they prevent them. And well, obviously if it was black's move, after queen g3, I'd probably take black. Yeah, that's a big attack. Other rooks come in e8. Okay, so knight g5, which not only stops queen g3, but threatens knight f7. I hate when that happens. I'm trying to attack my opponent and they're attacking me. Okay, so rook f8, preventing knight f7. And the rook's obviously better on f8 than it is on a8 for attacking. Queen a3. Does black want to trade queens? No, because then black would resign. 2 bishops totally crush a rook, especially at the grandmaster level, especially when the guy has no pawns. Even with a pawn, it wouldn't matter here. But okay, so Korchnoi's trying to get his queen in here to attack the white king, but he can't move forward because then white has an attack. So we can't trade queens, and we can't play queen h2, so back to d8. What do you want him to do? And bishop f4, blocking the f pawn, and it's clear to me that there's just nothing here. Again, the queen and rook are attacking the knight on g5, but the queen's overworked. Sort of like me. And if we take all these pieces here, then queen takes rook as mate. Okay. So the attack is stopped. White has 2 pieces for a rook, and looks like Karpov's going to play Fischer for the world championship. Okay, so h6, and the knight safely goes back to f3, and there's no attack here. And one of the reasons is black's knight on c6 isn't doing anything. So Korchnoi went all in, and he was rebuffed. And because of games like these, and games mainly from the 1800s, we learned if you sacrifice a lot of material, you have to accurately calculate that you have mate or a winning attack or win your material back, because if you don't, you're just going to say, where'd my material go? And I don't really blame Korchnoi. Korchnoi had black and he was behind in the match, so you got to win. So it's unfortunate. Now that's one of my best excuses. Normally, I try to draw all my games, and if I win, I go to the arbiter and say, no, I drew. Okay, I get lessons from Geary, by the way. Anyway, so I was playing Yuri Shulman in the last round of a tournament, an open tournament, and if we drew, we both won about $4. Okay, it might have been like $3.90. But if we won, then we won over $1,000. So even though I had the black pieces, instead of playing my usual try to draw every move, I played the King's Indian, I sacked everything, and then I resigned. Okay, so I tried to win, but trying is the first step to failure. And he won, and he tied for first the tournament, and people were booing until their throats were sore. Okay, so rook e8, but okay, there's Karpov's too good. Bishop d3, and he doesn't give up. Rook e4, trying to mess the game up because 2 rooks is just too good for 2 pieces is just too good for a rook. But maybe he can confuse his opponent. So Korchnoi was a very inventive, tricky player, and maybe if you take the rook, black will get some attack. G3, and Karpov said something very interesting related to this idea of not taking the rook, which I also wouldn't take. He was playing a match with Anand for the FIDE World Championship, and Karpov was 2 pawns up, and Anand sacrificed a piece basically for nothing. And Karpov didn't take it, even though computer would have taken it. And they asked Karpov, why didn't you take that piece? And he said, I'm up 2 pawns, that's enough. I don't need any more than that. Right? He was right, he just won with his 2 pawns. So here, 2 bishops for a rook, that's enough. If there's a way to avoid counterplay where there's no threats, that's the Karpov method. So after g3, it's hard to see black doing anything, like breaking through or doing anything. After bishop takes rook, pawn takes, there's knight's attacked on f3. If the knight moves, the black queen can come to h4. I could see a possible attack there. After g3, I don't know what black would do. Okay, so rook f6, I guess he wants to play g5. Queen c5, does play g5. Knight takes g5. Karpov simplifies into a much easier winning endgame now that black's king is exposed. And while black's running out of pawns and his pieces are pinned and attacked, yeah, every black piece attacked and pinned. Okay, and well, I would even argue that white's ahead material. White has bishop and 2 pawns for a rook. Actually, white has 2 bishops and 2 pawns for a rook and a knight. And if I had to pick one, I would always pick 2 bishops and 2 pawns against a rook and a knight. But here, all of black's pieces are pinned and hanging. For example, if it was white's move, I guess queen takes knight's pretty good. And bishop takes either rook is good. So every move wins for white. Black played rook e6, defending everything. Rook e1. This piece is black's only good piece. It's defending this. It's defending this. So he wants to get rid of that. And once the pieces are traded, and we have queen and bishop versus queen and knight, you'll notice that white has 2 extra pawns. So that's unfortunate. And he played queen to g8. Probably the simplest way to win after rook takes rook is just to trade pieces, and white's up 2 pawns for nothing. So, okay. So he played queen g8. That's the trickiest. h4, defending his great bishop. Again, we can't play rook takes rook now because bishop takes rook check, and then we take the other rook. Then white's up a piece. So he played rook to g6. Question?
In that line you showed,
Yes.
after the king moves, h7,
Yeah.
g3.
Maybe I should do this.
Oh, yeah.
Man, the truth hurts. I was assuming you didn't have a perpetual, but now I know you don't have a perpetual. Wow, I like this variation. That's what I'm going to play. Yeah. Also, I guess I have lots of other ways to win. Oh, that's a pretty good way to win. Okay, so instead of rook takes rook, played rook to g6. Whew. Rook takes rook. And now black decided to resign. Well, there's 2 moves that make sense, right? Queen takes and rook takes. Queen takes, I go check. I don't like this for black. Although I don't see an immediate win. Maybe I don't play check. It's hard not to because I like it so much. Yeah, probably he would check because he's Karpov. And Karpov would probably take this knowing him.
You can check with bishop as well.
You could. Instead of queen takes f5?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to do.
So then take with bishop, with white bishop.
Do what?
Take the white bishop.
But he takes with check. This would be risky.
Oh.
Yeah,
Check.
yeah. Only works in giveaway. Well, I mean, the Karpov I know would like this endgame for white. And then if rook here, I have g4. And this is a fairly easy win because we have 1,000 extra pawns and 2 bishops and passed pawns. And rook takes. Seems like I could take this. And if you pin my bishop again, I don't know, here, then g4. And man, one thing that's very strange about this game, this knight never moved and never could move. There was never anything good to do with that knight. just sort of in a bad square. Of course, we don't want to blunder and play something like queen takes d5, because rook e2 check would be annoying, followed by queen takes queen. So, well, probably a premature resignation from somebody who was not happy, but it actually reminds me of a game, Karpov beat Topalov, where he was also down in exchange, but had 4 extra pawns. And that he won pretty handily. So here with basically no pawns left and no defense to his king, Korchnoi resigned. And, well, after 6 games, it was clear he was going to lose the match. And again, this is a World Championship match lecture, although this match was de facto the World Championship match because Fischer defaulted. And if I want to do a real easy lecture, I could lecture on that match, Fischer Karpov. Okay, then I just show an empty chessboard and that would be it. Yeah. Now actually, I was at a match where somebody didn't show up and they won anyway. Chess is hard. Okay, and that was the match Korchnoi Kasparov 1983. They played in Pasadena. Korchnoi showed up, Kasparov didn't. And the arbiter was Koltanowski, and game 1 was a forfeit because Kasparov didn't show up. And Koltanowski said, I don't want to come here every day and forfeit Kasparov, match over. And Korchnoi, being in Pasadena during the US Open, which was in Pasadena, played in the US Open and tied for first with Larry Christensen, I think 10.5 out of 12, if I remember correctly. Might have been 10. That was the strongest US Open ever. Had about 25 grandmasters. Sarawan played, Korchnoi, Christensen, and Benjamin, everybody played. I was an expert at the time. And FIDE decided, that doesn't count. Let's play a match for real. And in '84, they played the match in London. And Korchnoi said, okay. I'm guessing if Korchnoi refused, I'm not sure what they would have done, because Korchnoi already won the match. So, anyway, they played. Korchnoi won the first game with black, and that was it. Then Kasparov showed why he was Kasparov. So, I guess you could not show up to a match and still win, but it's not easy. Only Kasparov can do it. So, very impressive. So Karpov was very impressive in the 70s, and there are some people who aren't me. They're not me. But there are people who think that Karpov had good chances against Fischer in 75, and that, I mean, I don't believe this, but Karpov in the early 80s they thought was better than Fischer in 75. I didn't play either one of them, so I don't know. But I do know that Fischer won 20 games in a row against GM, so that's reasonable. And Fischer was 27.85 FIDE when nobody else was like over 26.50. So that's, I mean, it's hard to gain rating points when there's nobody near your rating. So I'll bet on Fischer. But yeah, in 75, Fischer would have beaten Karpov probably. Would have been more interesting if Fischer never quit chess and played Karpov in 78, 81. Those would have been interesting matches. But okay, Karpov, a little too good for Korchnoi. This was the first of their World Championship matches. And then they played for the real World Championship twice later. Once was a very close match where Karpov was ahead 5-2 and lost 3 games in a row, making it 5-5, and the winner would win 6, and Karpov won the next game, so he won 6-5. And then later he won 6-2 pretty easily. And by that time, and during those matches, Korchnoi was a lot older than Karpov and obviously past his prime. But, well, this was a great match. Korchnoi in his prime, and Karpov almost in his prime in 74, close, and playing great chess. And it's too bad we didn't see Karpov Fischer. But it's some alternate universe they play. We'll just have to go there. All right, and hopefully we'll have more World Championship lectures, but not too much longer, because we're almost done with every game. Now we're just making up matches. All right, see you guys next week.